Okay, so without further ado, let's please get started with the first round of the African Individual Debate Public Speaking Championship 2024 with the first speaker from the proposition team. And please, Chair, feel free to take over the chair. I just wanted to get the debate started.
Thank you very much, and once again, welcome to this round. Without wasting much time, I think teams are already aware of the rules. The motion then reads, this house supports China's investment in Africa. Assuming all speakers are ready and all introductions being done already, I'll invite the very first speaker for that proposition to commence today's debate. You have 6 minutes to...
Okay. Can I use my own timer?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, in Zimbabwe, the Chinese have invested a lot into our country. They've built the biggest tire manufacturing factory and have provided jobs for over 500,000 people alone in Zimbabwe and have improved our economy significantly. Proud to propose. Panel, this is a support motion, and a support motion requires us to do 3 things. Firstly, it requires us to look at the vulnerable group, or group in this case. The group in this case is Africa, African businesses, and the people in Africa. And it requires us to ask ourselves what is going to be beneficial to these groups. Secondly, a support motion requires us to ask ourselves that is it going to have a beneficial end goal, and is the end goal going to be something good or something that's going to be harmful? Thirdly, it then requires us to prove that it's going to be inherently beneficial and that the end goals are going to be very beneficial in the end. So with that in mind, panel, we then come up to you and tell you that we are going to prove to you that Chinese investment is firstly going to affect vulnerable groups in a beneficial way and affect Africa in a beneficial way, right? Now, panel, as our characterization, we want to start off by telling you why we think that China is the best country to accept or to support investment from. Panel, first thing, China as of 2023 was noted to be the leading developing country and the fastest developing country in the world. What does that mean? It means that China has had a record-breaking development, in technology and in infrastructure. Secondly, China has the quickest manufacturing industries and the quickest manufacturing factories in the world, meaning that the moment they're able to invest into something like Africa, those quick factories and those quick economies are going to be able to give us a boosting economy faster. I'll take your PI in a minute. Now, thirdly, China has the most billionaires in the world, meaning that money is readily available, meaning that the want to invest in Africa and the money is already there, meaning that the moment they invest into Africa, we are most likely to have a quicker booming economy than if any other country was to invest, right? Now, what does investment look like on our side? Now, firstly, panel, investment looks like money, looks like infrastructure, but it also looks like China giving us ideas and helping us to execute our ideas as Africa. It also looks like a diverse economy. It looks like diverse enrichment. It looks like knowledge enrichment as Africa, right? Now, does Africa need this investment from China? Panel, firstly, we come up here and tell you that Africa has been backward for a very long time, especially after the colonial period, where we feel like we're taking steps back, and we feel like our economies have only degraded, meaning that Africa needs investment, which is going to make sure that in the coming up years, we are going to be able to have a boosting economy. And we believe that we need that boost from a country such as China because they are able to do it because of their long track record of what they've done in in other countries, even outside of Africa, such as in Southern America and such as even in Asia itself, where we've seen that investment in Japan from China, investment in Korea from China has given these countries boost, which has helped in their economies, right? Now, panel, what are we going to run to? Yes, I'll take your PY.
You stated that China has investments in Japan and other East Asian countries, right?
Yeah.
I just want to ask what exactly those investments are and how those investments boosted the country.
Okay, perfect. So these investments were monetary investment. These investments were infrastructure investments, right? Why did they help these economies? Well, when we look at a case such as Japan or South Korea, South Korea's economy was particularly dwindling. And when they got money from China, the economy was be able to be boosted because they were able to even start other businesses. And the infrastructure that they got, such as China built factories in South Korea, factories which help with building the economies. So why do we feel like that's going to be beneficial to Africa? But we feel like if a country like South Korea is given investment and their economy is able to boost, we feel like if Africa is given even more investment or that type of investment, we believe that as Africa, we're able to have a boosting economy as well. Now, what are we going to run to in this debate? Firstly, I'm going to start off with some preemptives. Then I'm going to move on to my first argumentation and my second argumentation and the third argumentation. My first argumentation panel is going to be the argumentation on the economy and infrastructure, and the third argument is going to be on diplomatic relations. Now, firstly, onto the preemptives in this debate. The best case which we're going to get from side opposition is this idea that China is going to basically bargain for political power because they've invested in the economy, meaning that they're going to run this argument on modern colonialism, right? But panel, the burden which opposition has to prove is that in Africa, a country or continent where there are other investments, such as from the United States, from Italy, they need to prove to us that Chinese investment is going to have more colonial bargain than the United States of America, mind you, which is also investing in Africa. They need to prove to us that other countries, such as the United States of America, such as France, such as Italy, are going to have less bargaining power in terms of colonialism than China itself, right? Then they're also going to run on their side this idea that China is going to basically force us into political irony, and because they're going to ask for debts back. Well, panel, we then come up here and tell you that China has got very favorable concessional terms, and they've got very favorable concessional terms, meaning that recently China has even stated themselves that they're going to increase the repayment dates of these countries to pay back loans and to pay back money. So therefore, we then ask their side to prove to us that China is firstly going to have more bargaining power in political control, and secondly, and they have to prove to us that Chinese investment or infrastructure is not going to be beneficial, right? Now, panel, our first argumentation on infrastructure in the economy. Why do we believe that our premise is true that it will become better? Firstly, why is it true? I'm going to give you three levels of analysis. First level of analysis, we feel like when China is going to give us investment in our economy, we feel like that boost in monetary value is going to be able to boost our economies. An example would be in Zimbabwe. The moment China gave us a few dollars, we managed to put that onto our businesses and onto our factories. And as we speak right now, our factories are thriving and because of that boost from China. Secondly, why is this true? Panel, we feel like in terms of infrastructure, when China is going to build something, we feel like they're going to move us forward in terms of technological advances. We feel like they're going to move us forward and they're going to allow us to keep up with the rest of the world, because when China is going to build something, we feel like they're going to build it to the best quality. And we feel like they're going to have that incentivized opinion to build those infrastructures, right? Why is this important? Panel, we feel like for a long time in Africa, we have not been able to have a strong economy or strong infrastructure because firstly, lack of ideas, secondly, lack of money, and thirdly, even lack of materials. So we feel like when China is going to invest in Zimbabwe, they're going to bring better ideas, they're going to bring more money, they're going to bring even better materials, which are going to help in our infrastructure, which is going to help in our economy. Why is the impact of this argument? Well, the impact of this argument, panel, is that we feel like when we have a boosting economy, when we have boosting infrastructure, it's going to be beneficial for every single African, for African businesses, for every single person who is living in Africa. And why do you believe that that is a good impact? Well, panel, we believe that Africans, even when we suffer from hunger, when we suffer from inflation, we believe that it is a cost because we do not have that investment or because of our economies are simply not working out. So the impact of that argument is that it is going to help more people in the end. So their side, opposition needs to come up here and prove to us that when we have, okay, with that in mind, because my time is up, I will leave the second argument on diplomatic relations to my second speaker. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the House at large. I am first speaker from House Opposition. And firstly, I'd like to start with my rebuttal of first speaker of House Proposition. First of all, they claim that China is the best country to invest in Africa because they have a booming economy. But this does not take into account the to camps to work in the labor industry and not being paid almost nearly anything. They're sent here as punishment for practicing their own religion. Does House Prop believe that this is in fact beneficial for us to be aligned with such a country? I'll take it later, thank you. Furthermore, they went on to discuss how their investments in countries such as Japan and South Korea were beneficial. Tell me, I would like to ask how. Firstly, I don't think that these investments actually had as much of a weight as House Prop would like you to believe. South Korea turned itself around through a dictatorship that started in the late 1950s, that started in the late 1900s. Moving on to our first point, I would like to first give an example of, laser please. I would like to first give an example of the country I'm actually from. I'm born in Zambia, and Zambia has also had a lot of adding to this debt is not benefiting the economy. In fact, it's putting the economy into recession. The exchange rate has increased significantly in Zambia, making living costs for already impoverished people even higher and causing more social inequality, just thus increasing the wealth gap.
POI.
Yes.
All right, you mentioned Zambia, and you specifically said that China has extended the debt as a form of relief. So in what way does this counteract the idea that China is a good investment partner if they're actively taking economic steps that are beneficial to help debt relief?
Thank you for your question. What I would say to that is that them extending the time the debt can be paid back, while it is beneficial for the country to be able to push this debt, to spread this debt across, does not in fact take away from that fact that debt is being created anyway. It is still adding to the debt that the country faces. And the implication that also that we need a foreign nation to fix our economy is also a very colonial idea. Many colonials came with the intent of building the country up. They took away our resources because they did not believe that Africans could handle these resources and use them effectively. This in turn, using this argument to back up China's investments in Africa, in turn does not have any valid backing, because we've seen in past that this has only led to the dehumanization of our own people, leading to people being able to treat our people as less than, as well as paying them less than for the services they provide. I'll take it later, thank you. So why does this actually matter? It matters because people in these countries are affected by these changes. You may argue that yes, it develops the country and gives them more jobs, but Chinese people are importing their own people to come and work in these buildings, and as I've seen myself. And so they may be creating jobs, but what are the standards for those jobs? Are we actually developing the country as a whole to be able to fill those positions, or are we just taking more people from foreign countries and putting them into our country as a means of improving the nation? House Prop is also likely to argue that we require this investment in order to be seen as legitimate countries in the space of international relations. But I disagree with this, because I believe that if instead of attracting foreign investors to develop our country, if instead we put people in charge who know how to run a country and will do so without being affected by the influences of corruption, that will do more for the country educationally as well as financially for the development of the country than it will than having foreign investors do that for us. I will take your POIs now.
Okay, you mentioned that China does cheap labor and stuff like that, where they use cheap labor and all that. Can you please prove to us how America, which is also investing in Africa, will not do the same? or can you prove to us basically what we're trying to say, that why should we single out China if other countries which are investing in Africa are doing the same? Because it's mutually exclusive on both sides.
Thank you for your question. And how I'd answer that is that my house has not proposed any ideas that America is any better in this sense. Now, the elimination of the current ties that countries already have would only lead to political instability, to further political instability, which we want to avoid as best as possible. And so what my house is debating is what my house is opposing is the new investments made by foreign nationals such as China. And so it is not, like you said, it is not only specifically about China. It is not cheap labor, but illegal labor. And so these countries, if one is to tie themselves to a country to rely on financially, which first of all, House opposition is against, we would not suggest that China is the best country for this, as your House stated. I believe there's another POI.
Yes. You mentioned on diplomatic relations. What is your take to that? Most countries are afraid to invest into Africa. So the moment we have China, a first world country, investing into Africa, other countries are incentivized to also invest into Africa, just improving the investment in Africa.
Foreign countries are not investing into Africa because they want to help Africa per se. They're investing into Africa because they know that there is money that they can gain from Africa. Africa has been known for its resources for decades. By investing in Africa, they know that they will then have bargaining power, not just politically, as your House stated, but financially. They will gain money and interest on the investments they made. And so the argument that it'll bring in more foreign investors and will thus develop the countries in Africa even more. To an extent, I understand where you're coming from. However, I do not believe that truly helps the individual countries bring up their own people for their own success. And you may, our other House is going to argue that Africa does not have the capabilities to do so because that power is taken away from them through colonialism. But my House would like to argue that Africa, since the days of colonization, has reached a point where they are able to, where they should be able to rely on their own leaders in order to develop the country further.
Point. POI.
Accepted.
You said that Africa should be able to rely on their leaders, but our leaders are very corrupt. So don't you feel like we need external help in order for Africa to be improved?
No, I do not think so. I think instead of solving the problem and covering up with foreign nationals aiding us, putting people into government who we know will do their jobs and not be affected by corruption will do more for the country in a greater sense. I am from South Africa, and this country is also well known for its high levels of corruption because government officials are known to keep the wealth that's meant for the country and development of public infrastructure and put it into their pockets. And because we export so many of our resources and import them back when they've been processed because we don't have the processing equipment, because our government officials are not doing what they're supposed to do, this only allows that corruption to develop further. Thank you. And I'll move on I'll let my second speaker do the rest.
Thank you very much, Speaker, for your fine speech. We'll now proceed to the next speaker.
Hello, am I visible and audible?